The premise of my paper is that to understand, actually, how does this thing work? Sorry. Oh. Right, the premise of my paper is that to understand if or how institutional investors integrate the risk of stranded assets, you first have to look at how institutional investors make investment decisions and what they mean when they talk about risk. So I'll quickly take you through the decision-making process of an institutional investor. Why is it going backwards? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to quickly take you through the decision-making process of an institutional investor. And I've picked a defined benefit pension scheme as an example because different institutions will have different methods. So if we focus on one, we can see how it makes decisions. And to show how different actors in the supply chain are motivated. Through the talk, I'll highlight what is meant by risk at the different stages of the chain. And it should become apparent that these meanings are orthogonal to the kind of risk that we've been talking about in this conference. Now, the problem that institutional investors are trying to solve is this one. How best to allocate assets between asset classes to minimise the risk of not meeting its liabilities at the lowest cost. If we take the case of a pension fund, which I've drawn a schematic diagram here, the ultimate decision rests with the trustees. However, there will be some influence from a sponsoring employer and the regulator. The scheme actuary will then advise on the funding level of the scheme, and together with an investment consultant will advise on asset allocation. The individual stock-picking decisions will be delegated to an asset manager. The first step of this process is to decide on the asset allocation. Whizzing through this slide, the actuary will assess the risk appetite of the institution and then will carry out what's called an asset liability model, which will inform the asset allocation decision. That is, allocating assets between broad asset classes such as bonds, equity and property or alternative assets. Once this has been done, a fund manager will be appointed to implement this asset allocation decision. Now, focusing on the asset liability model, if I can get to that slide. Yeah, okay, the asset liability model and example. Right. The asset liability model projects the cash flows of the pension scheme. That is, the payments it has to make to pensioners and the income it receives on behalf of members and from its investments. An ALM is a stochastic model. That is, you run a large number of randomly generated projections and you end up with a probability distribution of the outcomes. For a given asset allocation, the output gives the probability that the scheme will meet its liabilities. Right. In this case here, the risk is the probability that the scheme does not meet its liabilities. You can then vary the asset allocation of the model and compare the different outcomes to the risk appetite of the scheme. Behind the model, this is very important, lie assumptions of the probability distribution of return of different asset classes, how they are related to each other and to the liabilities of the scheme. So we'll go on to the next slide, which should explain that. And in this situation, unlike my last slide, risk is related to the volatility of different asset classes. Right. And this is an example of what the output for an asset liability model looks like. So you can see here, this is the scheme's funding level. It's reducing with time, and this is the distribution of outcomes. So if the scheme exceeds these outcomes, then it's okay. If it's under, it gets into trouble, and the employer or the regulator puts in more money. So here the risk is that the employer, the sponsor, will have to make extra contributions. Right. The next stage of this process is how stock pickers are selected and motivated. So once you have run your ALM and decided on your asset allocation, the stock selection decisions are delegated to one or more investment managers. There are a number of criteria under which asset managers are selected, but the main point I want to make here is that they are benchmarked against an index. So, for example, if after the asset allocation process, you might decide that 20% of assets should be invested in UK equity, for example, the decision on which stocks to invest in is delegated, which individual company shares is delegated to a fund manager who invests against a specified benchmark, which might be, say, for example, the FTSE All-Share Index. In the case of a passive manager, this investment individual stock picking decision is made by a computer program which tracks the index. But even in the case of an active manager where a human being makes the decision, the active manager often takes relatively small positions against this index. So if you talk to asset managers, they typically say things like, we aim to be in the second quartile. And what this means is that when they are compared with other fund managers, the manager aims to be just a bit better than average, because if they achieve too good a performance, this might imply they've got a high-risk strategy which will put asset owners off. And high risk here means the divergence from this specified index. A fund manager is typically compensated. So that's how the asset owner gives the fund manager, delegates to the fund manager. A fund manager is typically compensated by being paid a proportion of funds under management. So they get rewarded if they win new clients, and they get punished if they lose existing clients. And hence, because having more funds under management, you get a percentage, and so you get higher fees. They're scrutinised by investment consultants who typically compare their performance on a quarterly basis against other fund managers. So before we go on to my next bit, we can observe that this actually is going to cause some inherent problems, which I haven't really got time to go into today, but it's in my paper. But I want to point out the last one, which I can't really read. Where is it? Ignore. Yeah, so the kind of thing we're talking about, ignoring macro risk, which impacts a large portion of the portfolio, very hard to see how this investing against index can actually factor that in at all. And in this case, risk is a short-term volatility, but the risk to the investment manager is actually the risk that they'll lose the portfolio, right? So that's a different kind of risk. Right, so why do pension funds invest in this way? Why do they invest against an index, right? So there are two kind of main reasons. First of all is pragmatism, right? If you've got no knowledge of the future, you're no good at picking fund managers, you've got no idea what's going to happen, then it's quite pragmatic to stick it all in an index which just tracks the, whatever you're investing in, right? So it's an admission of your ignorance. And the second reason is based on modern portfolio theory, right? Modern portfolio theory is a group of economic theories which are really influential. I don't have time to describe these theories in any detail, but basically the markets are efficient, they encompass all known information, and investors are rational, which James referred to earlier. Markets follow a random walk. They constantly adjust to new information, which impacts them at random. As the market is efficient, you can't beat the market except by taking risks. You can reduce risk through diversification, and you can get increased risk exposure and hence potentially increased returns by diverging from the market. And because the market's efficient, the index represents the lowest risk, hence this is why pension funds and other institutions invest against this index. Now, I don't want to be too derogatory to modern portfolio theory, or MPT, because it does contain a lot of wisdom in it. It's very hard to beat the market. And also, if you talk to investment professionals, they usually say that no one really believes this, no one really believes the markets are efficient. However, many models based on MPT are widespread, and as is the terminology, you often hear terms like alpha and beta, and that comes directly from modern portfolio theory, and practices such as markets, mark-to-market, and invest against indices are justified by MPT. So it kind of forms the paradigm, which even if people diverge from the paradigm, it's the kind of narrative that people use, or the discourse that investors use. Now, I want to run quickly through an alternative model to MPT, which is which was developed by Don Farmer of the Santa Fe Institute. This is a model called an asset, an agent-based model, an ABM. And there have been a lot more, since Don Farmer did this, there have been a lot more complicated models, but I'm coming back to this one because it's actually quite easy to explain how it works and how it differs from MPT. So, unlike MPT, which assumes that all agents are homogeneous, economically rational agents, in this model there are two types of agents, right? There's a trader who buys, one kind of trader, seasonal trader, who buy and sell seasonally, like a farmer, when they have to. When the crop comes out, they sell, and when they need to buy seeds, they buy. And technical traders who develop technical trading strategies purely to make money, right? The model's not random, it's deterministic, and the underlying value of the commodity is fixed. And then you run this model many times and see, and the model generates the price. And this is what happens. So in this part of the graph, this is where you've got these seasonal traders who have to buy and sell, and the technical traders buying against them, and they make money, right? They make money, and until they make all the money that they could, they arbitrage out the price, and then the model here becomes efficient. This is the market becomes efficient. But after this point, funny things happen. What you get, what appears to be random behaviour, but it's actually caused by these agents, these people in the market trading against each other and developing trading strategies where they make money out of each other. And this graph shows where the capital goes. So at first, it stays with the seasonal traders, but then as time goes by, these technical traders, these guys trading against each other, get all the capital. And because they've got more capital, they drive the prices. Right. So what's all this got to do with strand assets? I've got to. Oh well, but first of all, I want to go, which model is better? So first one, you've got modern portfolio theory, which is used by everyone. It's got millions of papers literally written about it, lots of justification, versus this back of the envelope model developed by some strange guy in Santa Fe. But unfortunately, modern portfolio theory was heavily damaged by the financial crisis, which it didn't fail to predict. And in one crucial aspect, the Doyle Farmer model is better because it assumes that there's more than one agent, which is obviously true. And because of this, it shows, just this simple model shows that the market prices are driven by the interaction of agents with each other, which kind of chimes with reality, and it also explains a lot of stuff which modern portfolio can't explain, which is all there. I'm sorry, I haven't got time. I've got to whiz through that. It's in the paper. But this is my refutation of MPT. Because we're in Oxford, I'm not going to tell you where that quote comes from. You can work it out for yourself. But according to modern portfolio theory, efficient markets, that doesn't exist. There shouldn't be any financial intermediaries because the market's efficient, so you can't make money by having any information, but clearly it does exist, right? So I refute modern portfolio theory, it does. Right. So that's all stuff I've got. So how much time have I got, James? Now, I want to just digress a bit because it's stuff I'm interested in. 6 minutes, so I haven't got time to talk about who, but I'll talk a little bit about cultural theory. So anthropologists are guys who study the way people behave, interact with each other, and cultural theory is a branch of anthropology which studies how groups organise themselves. So cultural theory proposes that groups of people organise themselves based on norms of behaviour, and a group sees risks. A group sees risks as harms which transgress these norms of behaviour. And anthropologists have actually done ethnographic studies of finance professionals and noted that behaviour is based on norms such as employment contracts, the culture of the organisation in which they work, and even sort of quasi-theological beliefs. Now, I would be really interested to find out what the traders who were studied by the anthropologists actually thought of this, but it didn't say that in the paper. And beliefs which undermine the norms of the group will be rejected because the group is formed in opposition to these beliefs. So I think a lot of the discussion this morning, this is quite an interesting insight into that. And in this view, risk is culturally defined based on the norms of the organisation. I think people who talk to financial professionals or are financial professionals like myself will chime with them. So just going back to stranded assets, I haven't really got time for this. This is my formulation of stranded assets. So a stock, the value of a stock is the value of discounted future cash flows. And when you get this impact from stranded asset, you get at time t, the future cash flows will be reduced, but we don't know what time t is. It's uncertain. We don't know how much they're going to be reduced by, and it's going to impact large part of the portfolio. Shocks asymmetric, and there will be a positive impact on some stocks. Right. So what? So I've just picked out two graphs here. So this is recently the Shanghai Stock Exchange, and this is the NASDAQ doing a dot-com boom. You notice how the market, for no reason, has gone up. I think it went up 100%, gone down 50%. Similar in NASDAQ. And this is all caused by the agents themselves, the people in the market. So the risk is caused by investors, right? It's not caused by this external shock. There can be external shocks, but the market generates its own risk. So what conclusions can we draw from this? Well, my rather controversial conclusion here is the investment management model is deeply flawed. A few years ago, I don't know if any of you read this, the government commissioned a review from Professor John Kay, of Kay Review, to review equity markets, and the government then probably took absolutely no action based on his findings. And the Kay Review was totally scathing, so it's okay, I can be controversial because I'm quoting John Kay here, about the investment management industry. What he says is the investment management is essentially a zero-sum game, whereby managers compete against each other through relative performance. Asset allocation is carried out at the company level, not by the fund managers themselves, and so the only way the fund management industry can add value is through stewardship of investee companies. And in this respect, according to John Kay, the industry is totally failing to do this. It either doesn't do it at all, or when it does do it, it encourages companies to take shorter-term decisions, right? And then, so if we refer this back to stranded assets, it makes them investors are actually encouraging companies to be more short-term and then therefore not take into account things like the risk of stranded assets. And for this, the industry gets massively well compensated, which I won't go into. Right, so for me, the risk from stranded assets is not to our savings, but it's to the planet itself. And the risk is that they remain unstranded. Carbon Tracker estimated that there are potentially $7 trillion in potentially stranded fossil fuel assets, but this is a small fraction of the total assets, as most are owned by governments. And there are also a bunch of other assets related to fossil fuel intensive infrastructure. This amount of money represents the concentrated power that will ensure that these assets are burned and that we will head to catastrophically past 4 degrees centigrade warming. So as a warning, I want to talk a little bit a past stranded asset, the whale. Right? This is very demonstrated the stranded assets of whaling station in South Georgia near the Falkland Islands. And what happens to the whale in whaling is that whales became stranded assets around here thanks to John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil making whale oil stranded because it was replaced by gasoline. For heating and lighting purposes. I'm sorry. Okay, great. But rather than go away and die, the whaling industry found a new concentrated supply of whales in the South Atlantic, and it developed new technology so it could, it could exploit the economies of scale. And at the time, because of John D. Rockefeller, there was no market for whale goods, so the industry created a market in the form of margarine. And at the time, there were also scientific studies to determine whether whaling was sustainable, but the industry successfully stalled regulation until there were virtually no whales left. And you can see stranded asset here, and then this is the catch of whales. And then they stopped whaling because they killed them, and it became non-commercial again. So my conclusion, very joyful, is that perhaps the market knows the story of the whales, and is indeed rationally pricing the risk that fossil fuels will remain unburned, and it's pricing that risk at very low or zero.